A peaceful morning that turned out to be the doorway to a stroke. He had only been awake for 8 minutes. And then suddenly, the toothbrush slipped from his hand. His knees buckled right in the bathroom, his eyes trying to look toward his daughter, but he couldn't say a word. I still remember that morning very clearly. The ER called me in for what seemed like a mild stroke, nothing unusual, but when I learned he had only just woken up less than 10 minutes earlier, I paused. No stairs. No jogging. No heavy lifting. Just brushing his teeth like every other morning. As a brain specialist, I've witnessed hundreds of strokes in all kinds of unexpected situations. But this was the first time I saw the brain attacked before it was even fully awake. He was healthy, no chronic illness, no history of high blood pressure, lived a disciplined life. Yet because of one single factor, a sudden spike in morning blood pressure, everything changed. And I must admit, that moment truly shocked me. What shocked me even more was, this wasn't rare. Many people, seemingly healthy, silently carry the risk of stroke every morning. Because they don't know. That morning blood pressure can spike without warning. And just one such spike can double the risk of stroke, especially for those over 60. It doesn't cause pain. Leaves no clear signs. Doesn't make you feel anything unusual the night before. Everything seems peaceful. Until you wake up. Dear friend, I share this not to scare you, but to help you see, the morning, a time we assume is peaceful, is actually when the brain is most vulnerable. Have you ever felt a bit lightheaded getting out of bed? Or your heart racing oddly when walking into the bathroom in the morning? Did you ever think, maybe I'm just hungry or I'm not fully awake yet? But sometimes, those tiny sensations are the brain's first warning as it battles a surge of blood pressure. I share this because I believe you deserve to know the truth. Because if just 5 small actions each morning can save your memory, your speech, and your life, why wouldn't we start now? And to do that, we have to begin with a truth most avoid: that the morning isn't as gentle as we once thought. Warning: morning, the golden hour or the dark hour for the brain. There's one thing most people overlook, even those older adults who live very healthy lives. Nearly half of all strokes happen within the first 3 hours after waking up. And what's frightening is, those people often have no obvious history of serious illness. They simply wake up, do things like any other day, but something has quietly changed inside. Morning is often called the golden hour because after a good night's sleep, the body is ready for a new day. But for those over 60, if not careful, the morning can become a dark hour for the brain itself. Because just a few seemingly harmless actions like sitting up too quickly, rushing to the bathroom, skipping breakfast, or forgetting to drink water can all be the final drop that overflows the cup. I once met a 67-year-old patient who rushed to the bathroom every morning right after waking up. He didn't know that squatting and straining while blood pressure is already rising after sleep is extremely dangerous. That's the moment the brain is forced to handle another surge of blood pressure it can't respond to in time. Many people tell me, "But doctor, I'm still healthy, I don't feel any pain." Yes, and that's exactly what worries me most. Morning blood pressure doesn't cause pain. It's not like a heart attack, not like a headache. It's just a silent undercurrent but deeply destructive. I want you to remember this: the more normal you feel in the morning, but your blood pressure isn't under control, the higher the risk. You may ask, so what exactly is happening in the body each morning? Why is morning the time when the brain is so vulnerable? Let me explain that in a simple way. Because once you truly understand the cause, you'll know how to protect yourself before it's too late. Decoded: why the brain is vulnerable in the morning. Morning may seem like the time when the body is most alert, but for the brain, it's actually the most fragile moment. While you sleep, blood pressure drops, heart rate slows, and the entire circulatory system shifts into a resting mode. The brain becomes like a room with the lights turned off, quiet, conserving energy. But the moment you open your eyes, the body suddenly switches into action mode without warning. The sympathetic nervous system turns on like a switch, causing heart rate and blood pressure to rise rapidly in just a few minutes. The adrenal glands release adrenaline and cortisol hormones that stimulate alertness and quick response. If you're young, with flexible blood vessels, this pressure surge still stays within safe limits. But if you're over 60, with hardened brain arteries or a history of high blood pressure, it's a different story. That morning blood pressure spike is like pouring high-pressure water through an old, brittle, worn-out plastic pipe. Just a little too much pressure and the blood vessel can get blocked, or even rupture silently. It doesn't cause pain. It makes no sound. It doesn't warn with a sharp jolt. But that's when the blood flow feeding the brain is interrupted and the neurons no longer get the oxygen they need to survive. I once told a patient, "Morning is not the time to prove you're still strong." And he stayed silent for a long time when he realized that, for 30 years, he had jumped out of bed and rushed as if pushing his brain closer to danger. What haunts me is this: with just one small change, he might have avoided the dizzy spell that landed him in the hospital. But I know you'll ask, so how can we tell when the brain is being damaged if it doesn't hurt? How do we listen to an organ that doesn't speak, doesn't cry out, doesn't ring an alarm? The answer is, by paying attention to the subtle yet real signals the brain sends every morning. They're not as loud as a bell, but they're not completely silent either. And that's exactly what I'll share with you in the next part: the quiet signs that, if ignored, might become something you regret later on. Silent signs: the whispers your brain sends in the morning. The brain doesn't scream, and it doesn't know how to text you when it's in danger. But it has its own way of whispering. The question is whether you hear it. In the morning, if you feel a slight heaviness at the back of your head, especially when sitting up, don't brush it off. It might be a sign that blood hasn't fully reached the back cortex, the area responsible for balance and vision. If your vision gets blurry for a few minutes at the start of the day, like a thin fog that fades away, remember it. Many people who've had mild strokes say they experienced that weeks earlier but thought it was from poor sleep. If you stand up and your heart races abnormally fast, along with a dizzy feeling, your brain is under circulatory stress. It has to adapt quickly to changes in position and pressure, and sometimes, it can't keep up. If your hand feels slightly numb while holding a toothbrush or pressing the kettle button and it fades after a few minutes, don't ignore it. That sensation doesn't come from the wrist, but may start from tiny blood vessels narrowing in the brain. And if you feel drained despite a full night's sleep, not wanting to get out of bed, pay attention. Your body is waking up a still unstable circulatory system, and your brain may be experiencing an inner blackout. I know. Those signs don't sound frightening. They come gently, disappear quickly, cause no pain, so we often forget them by the time we reach the bathroom. But that silence is what makes them dangerous. Because most people who suffer mild morning strokes have felt one or more of those symptoms, repeating over days. They just didn't listen. Dear friend, if you experienced any of those signs this morning, pause for a moment. Don't rush out of bed, don't turn on the TV, or make coffee right away. Sit still, take 3 deep breaths, and ask yourself, how is my brain feeling today? If your head feels heavy, heart is racing, body feels unsteady, drink a glass of warm water before anything else. If you have a blood pressure monitor at home, now is the time to use it. Take a reading right after waking, write it down. And if you don't have a monitor, at least pay close attention to your body's signals in the first 3 minutes of the day. They are the map that helps your doctor understand what your brain truly needs. I'm not saying this to make you anxious. I'm saying this so you know, you are not powerless. You absolutely can hear your brain's voice if you're willing to slow down and observe. So don't wait until the brain is fully blocked to start looking for answers. Begin with slower, gentler, and smarter mornings. And in the next part, I'll guide you through 5 simple actions, no medicine, no equipment, to help you start your morning safely for your brain. Solution: 5 morning minutes to rescue your brain. If the morning is the brain's most vulnerable time, then it's also your chance to actively protect it. No medication, no machines, and no intense workouts. Just 5 minutes at the start of the day. That's enough to change how your brain enters each morning. I call it the golden 5 minutes, because this seemingly meaningless time can actually save you from a silent stroke. Let's walk through each step together. No rush, no complexity, just a kind gesture toward your own body. Step 1: take 3 deep breaths while still lying in bed. The moment you open your eyes, don't jump up. Stay where you are, gently turn to your left or right side. Place one hand on your belly, inhale deeply through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Count the breaths. Just 3, calm, deep, and full. This helps awaken circulation, increase oxygen to the brain, and prevent a sudden blood pressure spike when shifting from sleep to wakefulness. Once your brain has been soothed by steady breathing, it's time to move to the next position slowly and safely. Step 2: sit up very gently. Use your hands to support yourself on the bed. Count to 5 before gradually moving into a sitting position. Never spring up like a coil. Doing so sends blood rushing to the legs while the brain hasn't caught up yet. Your body just spent 6 to 8 hours lying still. Sitting up needs preparation, just like stepping into a new day. Once you're seated and awake, now it's time to rehydrate and help blood vessels function more efficiently. Step 3: drink a small glass of warm water. Place a warm water bottle by your bed the night before. Once you're stable in a sitting position, sip a few small mouthfuls slowly. Warm water helps thin the blood, wake up the digestive system, and support circulation, especially important for those with high blood pressure or a history of atrial fibrillation. Don't drink cold water. And don't drink too fast. After your blood gets that extra boost, we move on to waking up the whole body from hands and feet to the smallest joints. Step 4: stretch your limbs and massage your joints. Rub your palms together, rotate your wrists, gently squeeze your calves, and slowly circle your ankles. Stroke down from your knees to your ankles, as if softly calling your nerves to wake up. This small action activates peripheral sensation, wakes up your spatial awareness, reducing the risk of dizziness or falls when you stand. Now that the brain, heart, muscles, and vessels are all ready, the final step is to check in and listen to what your body needs this morning. Step 5: observe your body's sensations and check your blood pressure if possible. Don't step off the bed just yet. Sit still for 30 seconds and check yourself. Does your head feel light? Is your heart racing? Do you feel shaky or unsteady? If you have a blood pressure monitor, now's the time to use it. Same time each day. Same posture. And if the numbers shift suddenly, write it down and tell your doctor if needed. If you don't have a monitor, then your morning sensations are your most reliable temporary gauge. You might think, these 5 steps sound too simple. But I'm telling you sincerely, these simple things have saved many people I've cared for, just because they slowed down at the right time. Mrs. Dorothy, 75 years old, once nearly fell in the bathroom right after waking up. Since the day she started doing these 5 steps every morning, she told me something I'll never forget. "Doctor, now every morning feels like I'm dating my brain. I'm no longer afraid it'll betray me." We often focus on lunch, dinner, or sleep. But it's those first 5 minutes when we wake, still half asleep, that can determine a healthy day or a silent stroke. And there's someone else, an elderly patient from Texas. Just by doing these 5 things, she escaped weeks of dizziness, head fatigue, and fear of getting out of bed. That story I'll share right after this. But I won't tell it to move you emotionally. I'll tell it so you'll believe that you can do the same starting tomorrow morning. A story of transformation. Mrs. Helen and her morning gift. Mrs. Helen lives in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. At 73, retired, she lives with her husband and 2 small dogs in a cream-colored 1-story home with a wide porch. She has no major health issues, just mildly high blood pressure and occasional insomnia in the winter. I met Mrs. Helen for the first time on a November afternoon. She walked into the clinic a little slowly, with a cautious look in her eyes and a weariness that lingered behind her polite smile. She told me that lately, every morning she had felt dizzy when getting out of bed. No headache, no nausea, but a floating feeling in her head, a pounding heart, and an urge to sit down immediately. One time, she nearly fell in the bathroom while reaching for a towel. Her husband was very worried. And that's why he made the appointment for her to see me, even though she kept saying, "I'm just a bit weak from age, it's nothing." I asked her to check her blood pressure every morning at home for a week. The results startled me. Her morning blood pressure ranged from 155 to 168 while it was completely stable the night before. I sat down beside her and calmly explained, it was the morning spike in blood pressure that was making her brain feel dizzy in the literal sense. And if it continued, it wouldn't just lead to a fall, but the silent risk of a stroke. At first, she looked at me without saying anything. Then gently, she asked, "So what should I do? I don't want to become a burden to my family." I printed out the golden 5-minute morning guide and went over each step clearly. Breathe before sitting up. Sit slowly, drink water. Massage arms and legs. Write down how you feel in the morning. And if possible, check your blood pressure regularly. She nodded. No objections. No complaints. But I saw a hint of worry in her eyes, not fear, but doubt that such small things could make a real difference. 3 months later, she returned for a follow-up. Her steps were lighter, her eyes brighter, her laugh more relaxed. She said, "Doctor, you know, the first time I did those 5 steps, I felt so silly. But after 2 weeks, I realized I wasn't dizzy in the morning anymore. I stood up more easily. My breathing was steadier." Then she smiled, gently touched my hand and said, "Now every morning I do those steps like a routine. I call it my morning gift to myself." Her husband said, now she wakes up early, puts on soft music, walks the dogs, no more gasping or holding the wall. You know, when someone in their 70s can rise each morning without fear, that's not just recovery. That's being given another chance to live with intention, and with love for oneself. No special medicine changed Mrs. Helen. No expensive equipment saved her brain. It was just 5 minutes repeated every morning with the belief that she deserved to live healthy, live clearly, and live awake. Mrs. Helen's story isn't rare. It could be yours, your loved ones, or anyone's, as long as they start right from that very first moment they open their eyes. But I know, even as some are making the change, others still don't realize they're living with a silent morning threat. And that brings me to the final part, where I want to leave you with the gentlest yet most important message of this entire journey. Every morning when you wake up, your brain needs to be the first thing you care for. We began this journey together with a shocking truth: a sudden spike in blood pressure in the morning can silently double the risk of stroke, especially in older adults. Then, you learned to recognize the silent signs that seem harmless: slightly blurry vision, a racing heart, dizziness upon waking, quiet signals the brain sends out. We also explored why the morning is the most dangerous time, when the body shifts from rest to activity, blood vessel pressure surges, and the brain is the first to suffer if you get up too quickly. Everyday habits: skipping water, no warm-up, jumping out of bed in seconds may quietly damage your brain's blood vessels, little by little. But you've also been guided through 5 simple steps to protect your brain in the first 5 minutes of the day. Deep breathing, sitting up slowly, drinking warm water, gently massaging your limbs, listening to your body, and if possible checking your blood pressure properly. And finally, We met Mrs. Helen once overwhelmed every morning by dizziness, but after following those 5 steps regularly, she now calls them a gift she gives herself each day. No special medication. No complicated machines. Just your willingness to care for yourself at your body's most vulnerable time, right after waking up. If you've ever felt tired in the morning, ignored a dizzy spell, or seen a loved one suffer a sudden stroke, this is your moment to pause. Listen to your body. And take action. Tomorrow morning, slow down for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to protect your memory, your voice, and your clarity. If this message was helpful, don't keep it to yourself. Help me share it with the people you love. Tap like if you want to boost your brain every morning. Leave a comment if you have something to share. I'm here to listen. And don't forget to follow the Thrive 60 Plus channel to continue this journey with me, living aware, healthy, and meaningful after 60. You deserve to begin each day with a steady body and a clear mind. And you can start tomorrow morning.